to be joined by Sander Loones, who is a Member of Parliament in the Belgian House of Commons, the Belgian Chamber of Representatives, and was formerly a Member of the European Parliament. So, Sander, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
With pleasure.
Would you mind just start by sort of talking about, it's a very sort of a very abstract question. What does Flemish nationalism, what does Flanders mean to you personally?
Perhaps if I may first, the theme of your interviews is what is your country? My country is Flanders, but unfortunately I'm stuck in Belgium, which is another country, and which defines it all a bit. You see that Flemish nationalism is a political ideology that lives on already for as long as Belgium exists. It accentuated most during the Great World Wars, which we're living now. We just celebrated Remembrance Day, 11th of November. In that part of time, you saw a lot of Flemish soldiers who had to fight as well in that Great War, but were denied their rights. They didn't get their commands in their own language. They didn't get the support as others did. More French-speaking parts, and from then on it grew and grew and grew. What you see in Flemish nationalism is a bit the same as in nationalism in other parts of the world. Is you have a more romantic side, and then a more pragmatic view of nationalism. The romantic side is more the issues around culture, education, and so on and so on. And in that respect, you see that in Belgium, a lot of these competences have already been attributed to Flanders. So the Flemish government, we have our own government, our own parliament, is responsible for those more romantic cultural issues. But on the other side, you have the more pragmatic themes, things like efficiency, taxes, how do you assure your security, defense, and so on and so on. And all these issues still remain on the federal level, on the Belgian level. And in that respect, you see that this country isn't working anymore. The Flemish people, they generally vote center-right. They want more conservative politics. The French-speaking part, they vote more to the left, so they want socialist politics. And in this country, you always see that these politics need to be combined to form a federal government, and it's not working.
So your party, please excuse me how I pronounce this, the Nieuw-Vlaamse Alliantie, I hope I pronounced that correctly, the Nieuw-Vlaamse Alliance.
Absolutely.
Good. So though obviously you are in favour of an independent Flanders within the European Union. When did you personally decide when did you personally decide Flanders should be an independent state? When did you personally come to the decision that this should be the case?
Well, I grew up in a family that is my family. My father was already a member of parliament for the Volksunie, which was the predecessor of the Nieuw-Vlaamse Alliantie. You pronounced it very perfectly, the NVA. Not to be confused with the North Vietnamese army, but the Nieuw-Vlaamse Alliantie, New Flemish Alliance. So my father was already in Flemish politics, member of parliament on national level or regional level. So I grew up in the atmosphere, which was a bit the romantic phase of my nationalism, to call it like that. Afterwards, I went to college, university, studied law, and chose another path from politics. So I went and specialized in migration law and constitutional law and so on and so on. But then in whatever you do in this country, you keep on hitting your head on that Belgian wall, and you see that things aren't organized as they should be, that this country isn't working, that it isn't efficient. In that respect, we had Belgian coalition negotiations in the year 2010, 2011, which took more than 500 days. Belgium is world champion in all the wrong championships. So if you have a championship you don't want to win, Belgium is champion. We have the highest taxes, we have the highest state shortages, everything that you don't want, you come and see in this country. So we're also champion in longest duration to form a federal government, more than 500 days.
Recently as well.
Yeah.
Of course.
Voilà, we saw it now again,
with
the new government taking shape. If you look at the last 10 years in Belgium, about 3 years we had a government in full competence of power. Then we had 3 years a bit wishy-washy. certain competence, but not, but other not, and then 3 other years where they had no competence at all. So this country isn't working, and specifically in that period of time, 2010, 2011, I came back to politics. So they asked me to join the study office of the National Party, of which I became the coordinator. Then I participated and leaded also the government negotiations in 2014, and now also up to leading 2019. But specifically was also responsible on the technical level for the coordination of a big party congress we organized around confederalism. And that is what we're putting to the table now, is more and more devolution, but on a structural, logical level, where Flanders could get a lot more competences on all different kind of issues, and we really would change the dynamics and the structure in this country. What you see in Belgium is a bit like in the UK. You have central powers that are devolved. It's always in a negative atmosphere. What aren't we going to do together anymore? So always a bit of fight, a bit of discussion. We want to change that dynamics, say that all competences in principle should lie with the constituting parts, so Flanders and Wallonia, Brussels with the specific statute, but then ask to those communities, what do you want to do together? And that's a whole different dynamic, not asking what they want to stop to do, but where they think that there could be an added value in working together. And that's confederalism for us, which would mean a lot more competences for Flanders, also on a fiscal, social security level, mobility, and so on, security, and on other competences, no Belgian responsibilities anymore.
So I would like to ask about the confederalism. Is that the end game, as it were, or is that just a step towards? As in, would you be happy for Flanders to stay in a sort of confederal system with Wallonia, or is it eventually going to be Flanders then has to become completely separate?
Well, our party statutes are clear. Article 1 of our statutes states that we are for an independent Flanders as a member state of the European Union, a republic, not a monarchy anymore. Okay. They said we now have this program on confederalism, and I think that it is quite advanced in its technical structure and also in its ambition. If you see that in our confederalism, all the issues that would be devolved and would be competences of Flanders, you will see that you will have an almost Flemish state, but still working together in a Belgian confederation. I think the biggest difference between independence and confederalism is specifically the international aspect, because we know that on an international level, European Union, United States, and so on, NATO, if they speak to nations, they speak to the whole. And in confederalism, they would still speak to Belgium and not directly to Flanders. So that's the biggest difference.
Is there not? So correct me if I'm wrong, but is there not the Benelux Union? Is that not a confederation of Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands? Could that not be a sort of?
Yeah, the Benelux Union. If we are honest, it's borderline no impact at all.
Oh, okay.
So you have a collaboration around certain aspects, but it's marginal. It's really marginal. If you really want to count in international politics, for us it means working together in the European Union. We don't have the advantage of being an island. I'm sad to see you go, it's like when you're at a party and your friend leaves, because I have good and strong ties between Flanders and the UK, and it's like when you're at a party and your friend leaves and you would like to leave together, but you know you have to stay, and the atmosphere is a bit less. That's how we feel at the moment with Brexit. They said we lie where we lie, on the continent, in the middle and the heart of that European Union. So for us, it's important to remain in. And to change that union for the better, but also which would mean that we need more competences on the Flemish level to do exactly that.
Okay. So talking about the European Union, your party sits in the European Conservative and Reformist group, which is sort of described, I guess you'd say it's described as a soft Eurosceptic group. I mean, your party, I think, uses the term Euro-realism.
Exactly.
So what would you say needs to change in Europe? How does it need to be reformed to make it beneficial for your party and maybe just Europe as a whole?
The core values of the group in which we sit in the European Parliament are, I think, free trade and subsidiarity. And for me, in any case, that's the most important thing. If you look at free trade, you look at trade, at the economics, you look at the real basic and the foundation of that European collaboration, which is making sure that you can trade together, that there are no internal borders, which means that we live in a small country, which means we have a big exterior. So for us, our Flemish economy, it's really important for us to be able to trade with other nations. If you look, for instance, at Belgian export statistics, more than 80% of everything we export comes from Flanders. Only 20% from Wallonia and Brussels. But so more than 80%, whereas we represent merely 60% of population. So we do much more of our share. That's where our economy lies and our richness comes from, the foundation of our social economic model. So for us, the free trade part is really important in that European collaboration. And the next issue is subsidiarity. Europe should not do what member states and regions are more adept to do. And that's the key issue. We see that evolution towards the European superstate still exists, and more competences on the European level. What you generally hear from European politicians is that they are against all form of nationalism, unless when it's a nationalism that comes with blue flags with yellow stars on it, then it's a good nationalism. If it's European nationalism, it's okay, but all as the other nationalisms are being considered as bad. I think that's quite inconsistent. Okay,
so I'm just wondering, you talk about the idea of further ever closer union in Europe. I'm assuming your party is opposed to that. I'm just thinking, in terms of practical sense, what sort of policies would you prefer to be at the national level, and what sort of things should be at the European level?
I think now one of the biggest issues we see at the moment is agriculture. If you see at agriculture in the European budget, it's good for almost 30% of the European budget. But this means that we see an agricultural policy that is good for big industrial farmers, especially in the east of the European Union, which we're giving money now through national budgets, European budgets, going to these big international farms to compete with our own farmers, smaller farmers in Flanders, which means that we pay two times. We pay taxes which go elsewhere, and then we get the competition of someone who doesn't need our aid but is well capable to do it itself. I think that's a key issue where we should look at more national competence to be able to have politics that are much closer to our proper producers, which would also mean that on a European level, we could reshape that budget, because now 30% to agriculture, also 30% to cohesion policy, also money that goes especially to the east and the south of Europe. That's what we need to tackle. We need a more modern European budget, which means much more tackling migration issues, much more money for tackling security issues, because these two specifically are issues we cannot do alone, where we need European collaboration. Because we need the borders, internal borders of Europe to be open because of our trade. But if you want that, you need to close your external borders, and that means working together on that. But as long as Europe isn't funding that any stronger, we will all continue to lose. So these are typical some kinds of issues. Others are more the economic things, internal market, research, themes that are generally beneficial to member states who take responsibility to make their economics drive.
So just a final question on Europe. You've made it clear that obviously Flanders does rely on being in the European Union quite a lot for economic reasons. If Europe was to go down, I guess you could call it sort of the Guy Verhofstadt route, the much more sort of federal state look, could you ever see your party advocating that Flanders leaves the European Union, or has a sort of, I guess, a sort of Swiss or Norwegian relationship with the European Union rather than being a full member?
It's my main criticism on Euro nationalists or Euro federalists. Is that they are living in a hypothetical world. They are building castles in the sky. And I think we should not fall in the same trap. I think a European Union that would cease to exist is a castle in the sky. It will not happen. What you might see happening is that you see stronger cooperation between certain member states on certain specific issues, but I do not believe for a second that the whole of European Union would collapse. This said, our core link from Flanders in the European Union is a link with the Hanseatic League, the more traditional trade links that already existed hundreds of years ago between the Hanseatic cities, still exist today in these cities more to the north of Europe, and also with the UK, also with Ireland, is and remains our strongest focal point. Whether the UK is in the European Union or not, it matters. But it's not the absolute question. I spoke several times at the party conference of the Conservatives in the UK, and one of my typical quotes was, "You live on an island, not on a boat. Even if you're not in the European Union anymore, the UK will remain and lie where it is. It's not as if you're going to sail away towards the United States or Australia. So we will always want and need a good trade link, a good partnership between Flanders and the UK, which exists today and is for us crucial to maintain in the future."
Okay, so moving on. So just talking about the current state of politics in Flanders. In 2019, you had on the same day Belgian and Flemish elections. I believe it was in May, end of May, I believe. It was reading about those results. It was interesting. Your party won all three elections in the sense that you got the most votes in each election, but your vote share did go down a bit. So I'm just curious, why do you think your support, even though it was still relatively high, you were still the most popular, why did it drop? Why did it drop a little bit?
First, you're correct. We're the biggest party in Flanders and in Belgium. But are now only part of the Flemish government, not of the federal government. And how did this come? Specifically because of what you say. So we were indispensable. So we're absolutely necessary to form a Flemish government. In Belgium, it's not that case. We have a difficult and different electoral system than in the UK. For you, it's first past the post. If you're the biggest in a certain area, then you get the elected MEP. For us, it's different. We have a proportional system where also smaller parties can get some votes and representatives and so on and so on. That's what tackled us as a big issue. But then the second thing was what we see all over in Europe. Elections today are about migration. They are. We see it in every member state in the European Union, especially in the member states in the south. But also in us, we just came out of the big European migration crisis that still lingers on today. For example, still today we're in Corona times, which mean COVID times, which means that borders are almost closed and people cannot circulate. But still in Brussels, about every day we have about 150, 200 asylum applicants a day, which is enormous. If you set that out on a yearly scheme, which proves again and again that it's all about identity politics for the moment. My party was really successful in 2004. We are a party with a big history, but NVA only really started in the year 2002 with our big Congress. So that means that we only exist about 20 years. We will be celebrating our 20 years next year. And from that, we went from one elected MEP to the biggest party in Belgian politics in about 10, 15 years, which was enormous. And how did we do it? Especially also by having a center-right economic policy, but a strong line on identity politics as well. And that was quite successful up until the last elections, where we saw that a more radical right party, the Vlaams Belang, also got a big share of votes. But which is interesting to see in Belgium is that the two big Flemish blocs, Nieuw-Vlaamse Alliantie and the NVA and Vlaams Belang, they are not only communicating vessels. The share of votes got bigger in the election. So we didn't lose to them. We won, and they won even more. And you see that the votes for more Flemish politics are up and in the rise.
I was going to ask about the Vlaams Belang, because they quite significantly in those same elections. I'm just wondering. So first of all, do you accept? Did you lose some? I'm assuming you did lose some votes to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that would have been because of the issue of migration. But I'm just wondering, how do you make? Because I mean, the Vlaams Belang is generally viewed as a sort of far right, ethnically nationalist party. How concerning is it that Flemish nationalism, at least some parts of Flemish nationalism, are turning to this sort of purely ethnic nationalism? And do you see them as a threat to the more sort of mixed of sort of civic and ethnic nationalism you see in your party? Do you see them as a political threat at all?
Perhaps a couple of points here. One, yes, they did win the elections. They got a big share of the votes, but not only on the migration issue. I think what you also see and saw, as in different countries, is you have a lot of discontent in society, which goes much broader than only the migration issue. We came out of government participation, so which was quite atypical. A Flemish nationalist party participated at the Belgian power. So we had Belgian ministers within our party. Me myself, I was a minister for a short period of defense. And what you saw is that we managed to change the country for the better, but not enough, because this is Belgium. You cannot govern really well this country because it just can't be done. It's two countries combined in one. And the Vlaams Belang also benefited of that, people who are just discontent, and the only true voice was the Vlaams Belang voice, so they got these share of votes as well. Two, does this concern me? It does, on two levels. One, it makes it much too easy for the parties who are more on the left to disregard the center-right voices in parliament. What they typically do in the political debate in Belgium is they look at the voices of Vlaams Belang and they say they don't count. They put them aside in democracy and they build a majority within a newly defined smaller democracy. And it's quite atypical. They just disregard it, which means that on a relative scale, the left voices have a much easier time to form government without us. So that's one reason why a vote for the Vlaams Belang is a vote for the left. Quite atypical, but that's the result. The second reason is the Vlaams Belang puts on a nice costume and a well haircut and a new theme song, but again and again and again, when you look at reality, there still remains teams that are way too radical and extreme, and they don't distantiate them from them. Like only a couple of days ago, we had the November 11th Remembrance Day, in which we saw an electoral official on communal level from Vlaams Belang putting down flowers, but on the grave of an SS soldier, a German SS Waffen soldat, and so that's non-defendable. And time again, that's what we see. So we are confronted a bit atypically with a party, Vlaams Belang, who puts down their hand and says, let's work together. But on the same hand, they give you a big stump under the table by taking oppositions to us. And in the back of their heads, they are still supporting things that they should be distanciating themselves from.
Do you think so? As you said, you were in the Belgian government for 4 years, 2018, and also you've been in the Flemish government, I believe, since 2004, either as a minority partner or the majority. Do you think being almost, I mean, I don't want to call you an establishment party, but by being in government more, you become sort of more perceived as the Belgian establishment or the Flemish establishment. Do you think that might have been another reason why your vote share dipped a bit?
Exactly. That's what I also talked a bit about just before. The discontent, people who see that there are changes but don't see enough changes, look towards a party that is has not been infected by that sharing of power. So that did cost us, but it also made us gain things. What was our big strategy on participating on a federal level? What you saw in what you see in Belgian politics from already decades. We started reforming our state now 50 years ago. In 1970, we voted our first devolution of powers towards the communities then. But time and time again, every 10 years, there's a new step in devolution, more or less. What you typically see is that Flemish parties are begging. They put down their hands and they ask, can we please have some extra powers? And then if we pay, then we get some extra powers from the French speaking politicians. And we wanted to change that dynamics. What we tried to do was use Belgium against the French-speaking politicians by making sure that on a Belgian level there would be more right politics on a migration level, security level, but especially social economically as well. So a more center-right politics who would displease the politicians in the south of this country, the Walloon people, because they want a leftist politics. And we saw that worked. So on the one hand, we lost because of discontent and the votes that went to the Vlaams Belang. But on the other side, we gained, because what we see now is that the French-speaking politicians, they start to demand institutional reforms themselves, because they saw what could happen if they are not in control of Belgium anymore. They saw that if we aren't participating in Belgian power, Belgium is working against them, and they don't want to live that again, which meant that that's one of the reasons why these government negotiations took so long, is because also the French-speaking politicians are becoming well aware of the fact that that Belgium isn't working anymore, and that more competences should lie on the devoluted on the communal and regional levels in this country.
Okay. I'm interested, personally, what was your experience? I know you were a government minister, I believe, for 1 month.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's a record or.
No, it's not. We had a Minister of Defence, well, more than 100 years ago, who was Minister of Defence only 8 days. He later became Prime Minister of the country, so there's still hope. For me, it was a month. It was a month exactly. But I think I'm the most successful Minister of Defence in the history of this country. I haven't started the war, and I have not lost any war. No, but typically what you see, and you see it immediately, is that on a more serious note, whatever competence you take on a national Belgian level, immediately you see the differences in views, and French-speaking politicians want something else as Flemish-speaking politicians. It is what it is, and you have politicians still disregarding that or looking the other way, but reality comes smacking them in the face from time and time again. For me personally, on a defense level, you also see these differences of view, but they are much more maintainable, because you see more and more international collaboration on the defense flank. Again, we are a small country with a small army, so we have all necessity in working together, and we do so. If you look at our land forces, we work together with the French. If you look at our naval forces, we work together with the Dutch, with the Netherlands. So we already have a more international view on defense as well, because of necessity, because we're small. Belgium will not rule the waves, unfortunately. Flanders perhaps would.
So I'm just talking about. I was just thought of a question. You talking about the military. Do you think Flanders should join NATO? Would you be?
Yeah, absolutely. We absolutely do. No, NATO is the cornerstone of our national security. It is the beginning and the end. So it's everything. It's the alpha and the omega. We have, for instance, the Vlaams Belang saying that we should get out of NATO. It's from an illusion and a lightness. It's not bearable to see and to understand. If anyone thinks that we could remain safe without being a part of NATO, I don't see it happening. And
That
then on the other side, you have politicians defending a European army. That's also pie in the sky. So I don't believe at all that is to be realized in any short time foreseeable future. So, which means again and again that our cornerstone for our security is NATO.
I find it interesting. There's that the Vlaams belong or opposed to NATO. Just because I can never imagine. Obviously, in the UK, you hear a lot about left-wing opposition to NATO, but never opposition from the right. I find that quite interesting.
Yeah, it is particular to see. I think it's an absurd thinking through of identity and nationalist politics. It's good to know who you are, to know what your identity is, but it's also important in this world where we live in to see on which levels you need to work together. Yeah, on the issue of security, everyone can see what the track record of Belgium is on the level of security. There's only one conclusion: we need to work together.
Okay. So looking forward to the future. So finally, looking forward to the future. As you said, we've has now got a federal government. I believe it's made of seven different parties involved in the government. So obviously, you are not a part of that. How do you progress the Flemish movement? How do you make progress, practically speaking, towards?
What you see is that there's a big lot of opportunities, especially because of the fact that people aren't looking at nationalism in Flanders anymore on the really a romantic scale, but on the more efficiency level. And there you see that the politics that this new government is bringing isn't efficient at all. Just of the mere fact that they need to combine 7 parties and 7 views to form just one government. It's not doable to have a coherent story. Plus, you see that the only way in which 7 parties can work together is by handing out checks. So every party needs to have its own trophy, which means they need to spend a lot of money to do so. And if you see that, combined with the current issue in which we're in, Corona, but also Brexit and the impact that will have on our economy in the foreseeable future, it means that we will have a big hole in our spending budget. And the typical way in which these kind of parties want to fill that hole is by raising new taxes. And in that, the Flemish are the same as citizens everywhere. It's not popular to tax even a little bit more. The government now has started for a month and a half, and they already have announced 3 big taxes: taxes on savings, taxes on mobility, and so on and so on. Typically, taxes on the working class as well. So that will not make this government quite popular, which meant in the past that they started voting for parties that don't defend that Belgian tax policy, which meant they returned to parties as my party. So on that level, there are quite a lot of opportunities. One side of the medal. Other side is what you see now is we have a Belgian government that is supported by a majority in Wallonia. So more than half of French-speaking people defend this government, have voted for a party that is represented in this government. That's not the case in Flanders. So this Belgian government does not have a majority in Flanders. Not 50+1 Flemish people have voted for a government that is now part of this for a party that is now part of this government, which meant that they have made the psychological click to minoritize the Flemish community on a Belgian level. And that's a really dangerous trend. So the first part of the medal was positive. It gives up opportunity. The second part is negative. If they have minoritized us now, nothing says that they won't do it again. And in that respect, we live a specific time because next elections are in 2024, and then you have 2029 and coming up to 2030. And why is 2030 a relevant date? Because then they would be celebrating I will not be on the front row, but they would be celebrating 200 years of Belgium. It would be the existence of the country Belgium would be, they would blow out their 200th birthday candles. So you see now already in this team that they are building up an atmosphere towards 2030. So it could well be that they continue for 10 years with this government who is not supported by majority in Flanders, and that's our big challenge here, to combine these two parts of the coin, making sure that the next time they cannot form a government without us. And if we are indispensable on that period of time, we know what we will bring to the table, and it's more competences for Flanders.
So just in terms of, I'm just trying to understand the practical elements. So how would you, so for example, obviously in the UK, for Scotland, say, to become independent, there'd have to be a referendum supported by the UK. In practical sense, how does Flanders, I mean, it's probably a bit technical legal stuff, but how does Flanders become an independent country or become part of a confederate state rather than a federate state? How does that happen practically?
What we see is that Flemish people, they haven't got a revolutionary character strike, not at all. So what we saw in Catalonia, for example, where you had a big democratic support process of more than 1 million people, 2 million people in the streets defending a free Catalonia. So big democratic support. It's typically what you don't see in Flanders. It's too cold here, too dark. People like staying in their houses, put the shutters down and look at television. So that's the nature of our people. That's why we love them. But I think it's important to always be realistic in politics and take given data into account. So we are not a revolutionary people, which means that we will not have revolutionary politics. We need evolution, and evolution in Belgium means taking steps and steps and steps towards these more competences and responsibilities for the Flemish nation, and that's what we're building up on. But what you see now, which is different in respect of the other state reforms, is that we've come to a point where two things are different. First thing is, I think now everyone sees that this country is blocking. We haven't shifted powers in logical blocks. We've done it in the past. Like, for instance, education was a national competence. We took the whole issue of education and we devolved it. But now we see that the last state reforms, they only took bits and pieces of competences, gave them to the communities, and the rest stayed on the federal level, which means that everyone is blocking another and walking in the way of someone else. And now everyone acknowledges that. So that's a win. The counterfact is that for the first time in our history, we see that there's a quite eloquent new voice coming up in Belgian politics, which says that we should not only devolve competence, but we should also refederalize. We should take take a competence we gave to the communities away and put them back again on a federal level. And in that respect, you see that our biggest challenge is reminding people of why did we do what we did. There was a logic behind devolution. Certain people now think in terms of simplicity. It's Belgian populism. For instance, now we have a COVID crisis. They say, we need one health minister on a Belgian level, and then everything would be resolved. Whereas we see now for months already that contamination levels and so on are much higher in Wallonia and much lower in Flanders. So even in COVID shows that our country is two countries combined. Flanders is different than Wallonia. But still, we have one. Still, they think they can resolve that with one minister and one form of politics. It's beyond all logic, but it's easy on a populist level to sell, as if centralism would solve the world.
And on that note, thank you so much for your time, Sander Loones. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on.
With pleasure. I hope you enjoyed the artwork. It's some
Yes,
kind of, I'm now in my office in the Belgian Parliament. It comes in one of the basements in the Parliament. I put it up because it's old. The frame is in a really bad state. I think it symbolizes well the country we are stuck in.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Hi guys, thank you for watching this latest episode of PhD-Politico Discussions. If you enjoyed this video, then please don't forget to give it a like. And if you want to watch more content like this, then please do subscribe. Bye guys.